In limbo tonight.
They're waiting for a decision from the Nebraska Supreme Court on whether their rights have been restored. Tonight, Brian Mastry looks into the implications as deadlines to register to vote are looming.
Early voting is underway in Nebraska, but one group of voters are worried. They're waiting to cast a ballot until they hear from the Nebraska's highest court.
8 days before the online registration ends and about 15 days before the in-person registration deadline ends. And there are so many people who do want to exercise their right to vote. Some who are registered under the LB 53 who are nervous to vote because they don't know if they'll be charged for voting. So we really need this opinion from the Nebraska Supreme Court as soon as possible.
The Supreme Court is considering this. Can state lawmakers decide when and how to restore a felon's voting rights? The Attorney General says they can't. It's unconstitutional, that only the Board of Pardons can do that. The Supreme Court heard arguments in August.
That's the most basic right that we have, is the right to vote.
At one time, Nebraska felons who served their time had a lifetime ban for voting. In 2005, Nebraska lawmakers restored their right to vote as long as they had completed their sentence, followed by a 2-year waiting period. Recently, Nebraska senators removed the 2-year waiting period. It's estimated there are 80,000 Nebraska voters in limbo right now. On your side, Brian Mastry, 6 News.
The Nebraska Supreme Court typically issues opinions on Friday. According to its website, there are no opinions it's planning to roll out tomorrow.